Can I continue?
Everything is great.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much, Rabbi. So let me go on by saying that I really want to thank you and thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I think that what you have done is incredible and so amazing. Now, what I'm going to try to do is share with all of you the past 30 years of my life in about 30 minutes. And every time I speak, it comes out different. I don't go in order, so you really have to pay attention. If you happen to hear my emergency,
is everything okay?
if you happen to hear my emergency radio go off, you can just disregard it. I have very good people that are on call, but I just keep it always on wherever I am. So I'm going to try to share with you the past 30 years in about 30 minutes. I'm going to take a couple of breaks to ask you questions, because I feel it's very important for me to hear the questions from the audience so that I can tailor my presentation to what you want to hear and what you need to hear. So I think that you should just know, just like in a nutshell, a little bit about the chronology of my journey. And my journey has been one that was filled with naysayers. Every step of my journey, I had people who would tell me, Ruchie, it's impossible. It's never going to happen. It could never happen. And my response would always be, how do you know? If God wants it to happen, if Hashem wants it to happen, it's going to happen. And that is just the philosophy that has carried me through. If you have faith that God runs the world, he will not let you down. So I graduated high school when I was 17 years old. I went to Bishapov High School, an all-girls, ultra-Orthodox school. I came from a Hasidic background, and some of the girls in my class were Hasidic, some were not, but we all were together in school. I got married, I was 19 years old, and I married a young man who was going to sit and study the Talmud, and I was going to support him because my parents were not wealthy. They were not from any rabbinical dynasty. They weren't rabbinically connected, and they weren't politically connected. Just good, solid, hardworking parents. I worked as a legal secretary, and I took a course in high school to prepare me to be a legal secretary. And by the time I turned 30, I felt it wasn't enough. And that's when I started to go to college. Now, when I graduated high school, there were no college opportunities for Hasidic girls. But while we Hasidim are nonconformists, when opportunities change, we're all there. So when Touro College opened up its doors and catered to the ultra-Orthodox community and had separate classes for men and women, and no classes on the holidays and no homework on Shabbos, that's when I was able to go to college. And it took me 6 years to finish my undergrad. And then I went to law school for 4 years, and I was able to become an attorney and take the bar when I was 40. To become a judge in New York, you have to be admitted to the bar at least 10 years. So do the math and figure it out. And if you figure out how old I am by the time we're done, it's perfectly fine. I have, thank God, 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, just like the Brady Bunch, but 1 husband. And yes, my girls are all blonde. And in December, I married off my youngest daughter. So thank God they're all married. And for all the people who said, Ruchie, the things you do, you'll never be able to marry off your children. You'll never do a good shidduch with your kids. It's just not in the hands of man. The world and shidduchim are in the hands of God. So my children are all married. And Baruch Hashem, my oldest granddaughter is almost 12. And that's about it.
Can I interrupt you 1 second? Just one
Sure.
second. I'm not sure if everyone knows what a shidduch is. So if you don't mind
Sure.
translating any Hebrew words. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for stopping me. If I do say anything in Yiddish or Hebrew, I will try my best to translate. But shidduch means to find a marriage partner for your children. And that's one of the biggest challenges in the Hasidic community for us as parents, is to marry off our children. And a lot of it goes according to your reputation and your standing in the community, if you'll be able to do a nice match with your child. And everybody had predicted that with all the things that I do, which are off the beaten path, I will not be able to marry off my children in a nice, reputable family. But they were wrong. The naysayers were all wrong. So let me go back, rewind a little bit, and start what it was like growing up, when I was growing up in Borough Park, and explain to you how I was able to navigate through my journey. So, as I told you, my parents were hardworking parents, simple and hard workers and humble, but really incredible parents. They still are incredible parents. My mother, who was and still is my best friend, always taught us. Now, I was growing up, we were 4 girls, and my youngest sibling, my baby brother, was born after I was married. So we were the Gluck girls growing up. My maiden name was Gluck. My mother did have a son, and my brother was born after I was married. My mother and I were both pregnant at the same time. We took Lamaze together, and we really are still great friends. So she raised us with incredible ingenuity. And she said, girls, you can do whatever you want to do, so long as it isn't illegal, immoral, or against the Torah. So even though I was growing up in a very, very ultra Orthodox home, I never felt that I was constricted. I never felt that I was restricted. I never felt that there was something that I wanted to do that I couldn't do. I knew there were rules, the Torah guides us, but I never felt that there was something that, oh, I wish I could do that, but I couldn't do it. Now, my father, he was just incredible. He really didn't care about what grades we got when we were in school. So if any of you think that I was pushed to excel or be valedictorian, no, I wasn't from those girls. I had friends who were afraid to go home if they got a test, an exam back, and they got less than a 90 on their exam. My mother would say, Ruchie, you did the best, and she would just sign it. They were too busy, too hardworking to make a big deal about our grades. But when PTA came around, my father's first question was, how does my daughter behave? What is her character? What are her midos like? That's what was most important to my parents. In fact, I really was a very average student. When my youngest daughters, and they're twins, by the way, so when my twin girls were in their senior year in high school, I went to the PTA, and one of the teachers says to me, hey, Ruchie, I recognize you. Weren't you the one that went to law school and became a lawyer? And I said, yes, that's me. And she says, come to think of it, she says, I don't remember you being one of the smart girls. And she was absolutely right, because I was really considered a very, very average student. And that was just perfectly fine for me. And it was fine for my parents. Now, I also happened to be very, very lucky. And I'll tell you why. I grew up in the 1970s, and I was, and I still am, the oldest grandchild of Holocaust survivors. So my generation, we proved that Hitler, may his name be obliterated, was wrong. That not only did he not end the Jewish people, not only were there survivors and children, but now there are grandchildren. Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, the Jewish nation is eternal. So when we went to school, all we had to do was breathe. You sat in class and you inhaled oxygen and you exhaled carbon dioxide, and you were called Tire Kind in Yiddish, precious dear child. So I wasn't pushed by my teachers, I wasn't pushed by my parents or anybody else. And yet, growing up as an average student, I was able to achieve what I did simply because if God wants something to happen, it's going to happen. Not because we push our kids, not because we push ourselves. We have to try, but success is in the hands of God. But aside from that, the reason why I accept speaking invitations and I speak to people, because I really have a message. And my message isn't my story. My message is that when you have standards, when you have your values that connect you to God, and we're all different, like I said when I first started, we're all different, and God created us diverse and different. But we all have something in us that connects us to God. And whatever it is that connects you to God, don't think for 1 second that you have to compromise those standards to be successful in the secular world. Whether it's the corporate world, the medical world, the legal world, whatever world you happen to find yourself, you do not have to compromise your values or your standards. And I'll tell you something else, that when you stand up for your values and your religious beliefs and what connects you to God, not only will people respect you for it, but they won't let you let go. And that is really my main theme. And that is what I want to share with you tonight as I go through my journey and I share my experiences together with you. Very often I'm asked to speak to girls that are graduating high school or college from the religious community. And I tell them, you're going to leave school and you're going to be confronted with the outside world. and you're going to be filled, your life will be filled with challenges. But you need to know that when you stand up for your values, don't worry and don't think, I'll miss that opportunity to get the promotion, or I won't get the job, I won't get the interview I want. Because when you stand up for your values, the message that you're giving to your colleagues, your coworkers, your supervisors, is that you're a person of honesty, integrity, commitment, and loyalty. So when everybody's going to a restaurant and the food is not kosher and you're not eating it, or if you're leaving early on a Friday to go home to light the Shabbos candles when no one is looking, you're the person that people are going to trust when there's some sensitive corporate secret. Who else will they think is honest and reliable if not for that person who keeps her religious values even when no one is looking? So I have a number of stories that I'm going to share with you, but I want to save those stories a little bit later. I'm just going to continue sharing the narrative of my journey, and then I'll go into the stories a little bit later. So people often ask me, so Ruchie, who is your role model? Is it Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Is it Golda Meir? Who's your role model? And I'll say none of the above. So my role model is a woman who lived in Krakow, Poland between the two world wars. And her name was Sarah Schenirer. I don't know how many of you have heard about her, but when I went to school, I was taught that she is the mother of the Beis Yaakov movement. And that's the name of the school that I went to. So Beis Yaakov was the name of the first school that was established for Jewish girls. And that was around the 1920s. Now, Sarah Schenirer was a seamstress in Krakow, Poland, during the era that we called in high school the era of the isms: communism, socialism, Marxism. All these political theories were sweeping through Eastern Europe, and many of the religious girls and boys were getting swept away, and they were leaving the fold. Now, the boys, they had the yeshiva that they would go to. They would learn with their rebbes, because the policy was back then that everybody had to go to public school. But after public school, the boys had a yeshiva that they would learn in. But the girls didn't, because it was expected that whatever a Jewish girl had to know, she was going to learn at home. And Sarah Schenirer saw, as a seamstress, what the girls were going through, the challenges of the outside world. She said, if they don't have a strong understanding and a foundation in Jewish education, we're going to lose our daughters. Now, when I went to school, I learned about Sarah Schenirer as the hero of the Beis Yaakov movement. But they didn't teach me when I was in school that she had opposition. Now, very often people ask me, Ruchie, how can you identify yourself as a Hasidic woman when you know that modesty is so integral in Hasidic thought and in Hasidic values, but yet you have this public persona, you speak publicly, you were featured in a documentary film, you're interviewed on TV and the radio. How do you justify that? And for many years, I struggled with answering that question, because I knew that I was doing nothing wrong, but I didn't know whose lead am I following that this is the right thing to do. So years ago, when I was already married with children, but many years after I graduated high school, I was traveling with my husband, and very often when we travel, we will stay for Shabbos at some nice Chabad family who would invite us. And I think we were traveling in someplace on the West Coast, and we were there for Shabbos, this lovely family, and I noticed a book on the bookshelf, Carry Me in Your Heart by Pearl Benish. And that is a book about the life of Sarah Schenirer by one of her students who just recently passed away a couple of years ago. And as I'm reading the book, I'm realizing, oh my goodness, this is really what I'm experiencing. All the things that I want to do, all of my projects and all the public things that I do is really exactly what Sarah Schenirer went through. And then I read one of the profound lessons that she taught her students, and I love to repeat it. And she said, girls, a Jewish daughter should always wear a dress with two pockets. And in one pocket, you carry the verse from Psalms, from Tehillim. King David writes, Kol Kavuda Bas Melech Prima. The honor and the glory of a Jewish daughter is what's inside her. It's her innermost personality. So my students, she would say, whatever modesty means to you, you carry it in your heart with your head up high, because your modesty is what identifies you as a Jewish daughter. But she said, in your other pocket, you carry another verse from Psalms. King David writes, Esla Sosla Hashem. There comes an Esla Sos, a time to act when people have trampled Torah values. And girls, she said, you will see when people are trampling Torah values, you stand up, you be leaders, and people will follow you. And I said, now I know I have my role model, because yes, it's okay for me to take a stand and to take a leadership role when it is necessary for the Torah values. Now, I like to say I have a profession, not a career, because using the word career has this connotation that your family's on the back burner. And for me, it was always important that my family comes first. It doesn't mean that I didn't miss a school play here or there. And it doesn't mean that I didn't make mistakes along the way. But my children always knew that they were so important to me. And every one of my children had a chance to come to a college class with me, a law school class with me, and to come to work with me. Because when I would tell my young children that mommy's going to school, they should understand what it is that I'm doing. Now, another interesting thing that happened is all the naysayers had predicted, Ruchie, you're going to go into the outside world and you're going to be confronted with challenges and you're not going to stay as committed to our community. You're not going to stay as devoutly religious as you are. And I couldn't understand why is it that being devout to my Hasidic traditions and values and raising a large family should be mutually exclusive to having a higher education and having a profession. And I said, I have to find my own path. I have to find my way of making it happen. And that's really what it was, my friends. It was just my personal dream and my personal path. It never occurred to me that my personal dream was going to be a topic of conversation. It never occurred to me that people would be interested in hearing me share my story, because it was a very private, personal dream. And in fact, when I did start college at the age of 30, when Torah opened up, I didn't even tell anybody why I was going. I said, I'm going to major in business. I took one course in economics the first semester. The professor was talking about guns and butter. And I said, this is not for me. I switched majors to political science and pre-law. And that was it for me. I was law all the way. Now, interestingly enough, the further I got in my education and in my path, there was the opposite that happened. I kept on seeing the hand of God, the siyata d'shmai, the divine providence that was guiding me, so that unlike what the naysayers had predicted, I was becoming what we would say like more to the right, more religious, more connected to God than the other way around. Now, when I started law school, that's when I got a little bit concerned, because when I went to college, even though I was 30 and I had been out of high school for so many years, Touro College really was an extension of high school. It was an all Jewish environment. It was all Jewish professors. So I didn't really think that it was anything that was really that far off the path that I had been. When I got accepted to law school, that's when I started to worry. Now I knew I was going into a very liberal academic environment. And I knew that it was going to be very, very different from the experience that I've had until now. So I made my deal with God. And I said, dear God, help me get through law school without compromising my Hasidic values. And when your children come to me for help, they need legal help, dear God, I will help them. And I will tell you that God wasted no time in testing me. Very shortly after I graduated law school, I was approached by a woman from Borough Park if I could help with her son, who is what we call a kid at risk today. He was being rejected and expelled from one yeshiva after the other, and he was doing drugs, and he was desecrating the Shabbos. And I said, sure, I'm going to help you. And then when I wanted to sit down and meet with her, she said, oh, before we meet, why don't you call my friend Suri, because her son Yankee, he also has this problem. And then I called Suri and she said, why don't you call Rivki, because her son Chaim also has this problem. And before I knew it, it had mushroomed into a group of kids that were coming to me. And I realized these weren't bad boys. I didn't have enough tissues on my desk when they came to my office to talk to me. These boys were making bad choices because they were broken. They had gone through some trauma. And I learned a lot about these boys and I advocated for them. And I helped the yeshiva get started in Williamsburg. And then some men came along and they got involved in this program. Then a couple of years after that, after having made a name for myself as being an outspoken advocate, a group of women contacted me that they wanted to help serve other women in the Hasidic community as EMTs. They were EMTs and they were also labor coaches, doulas. And they explained to me that the very reputable and recognized organization of EMTs in the Hasidic community and in Jewish communities across the country, it's only men. It's an all-male organization, and women are served. If a woman calls and she's having an emergency, they will respond, and they save thousands of lives every year. But if you want to volunteer and respond to calls, and you're a woman, you can't join. And I said to myself, this is the 21st century. I'm going to advocate for them. I'm sure I'll get them in within a couple of weeks. I'll go on to my next mitzvah. But lo and behold, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I became the director. I became an EMT with my mother, of course. We took the class together. Then I went on to become a paramedic, and it has become a real important part of my life. And yes, I wake up in the middle of the night. And yes, I've delivered babies already. And yes, it's an incredible feeling when you want to do something really for the good of other people, and you work hard and you see the divine guidance, the hand of God guiding you all this way. Now, when I had gone to law school, I had read a book about what to do when you go into an environment where your religious values may be compromised. And it was a book that was written mostly for men who were going out into the work world and leaving the Hasidic community, and how they should be able to deal with the challenges. But I felt it was relevant for me going into law school. And there was some very good advice there that when you're going into a place where people don't know who you are, be open. Share your religious background, tell people who you are, and don't leave them guessing and making assumptions. So I went to law school. Everyone knew that I was Hasidic. Everyone knew that I had 6 children. And it really helped me. I also got involved in outreach. I did my own little outreach programs in law school. Before all the Jewish holidays, I made a little get together. And I had the professors come and speak, and it was really nice. I had my kids come. We played dreidel, and I made latkes for Hanukkah, and I would have the Purim costumes before Purim, and before Passover, I set up the whole Seder table. So that was what I did, and I have a great mincha story of what happened when I was in law school. And if we have a chance during the Q&A, I'll share my mincha story. But that was basically how I got through law school. And everybody had predicted, Ruchie, you'll never get through law school. You'll never get into law school. And if you get in, you'll never get through it. And if you do, you'll never pass the bar. And if you do, you'll never have any clients. Well, had you shown me a map of North America when I graduated law school and said to me, Ruchie, where do you think you'll have your first law office? The last place I would have picked would have been Kiryas Joel in Monroe, upstate New York. And that is a Satmar Hasidic community. And those people found out about me, and they were my first clients. So if you want to make God laugh, you tell them your plans. And then people will always ask me, and how did all this affect your children? And how did you end up running for public office? So I'll answer now the public office question, and then we'll open the floor for your questions. So my mother's sister was married to a young man when she got married who was going to go to college and law school. And as I was a little girl growing up, I watched my uncle become a lawyer, work in a law firm, then clerk for a judge. Then I watched him become a judge himself. And when I was doing my undergrad, I used to spend time in his courtroom observing him and writing reports about what he did as a judge and what I was observing. And I told him, Duvi, I'd love to become a judge like you one day. Well, one day he calls me up and says to me, Ruchie, if you still want to be a judge, you're going to have to run for my seat because I'm going to be retiring this year. And my original seat, because but by the time he retired, he was a state Supreme Court judge. But when he was elected, he was a civil court judge. He says, if you want to be a judge, you have to run for my original seat because most of the district is Borough Park, and that's the only chance you have to win. And I'm thinking to myself, I'd have to run. I always dreamt of becoming a judge by being appointed. I didn't think about running in a campaign. So it was around Sukkot time. And you see the room I'm sitting in right now? This room is my den, but it also serves as our sukkah because the skylight opens up and it becomes a sukkah. So we were sitting in this room with the tables all set up. And I said to myself, I'm going to have to ask my husband and my kids, what is their opinion? Because ladies, let's face it, as successful as we are, without the support of the men in our lives, it would be a very, very, very hard uphill battle. So I'm serving the chicken soup, and it was on the Sukkot holiday. I'm coming into the sukkah serving, and I say, you know, everybody, my uncle Duvi just called me, and he said he's going to be retiring this year. And if I want to be a judge, now's my only chance to run. So what do you think? Now, everybody had put down the soup spoon and looked up at me, and my husband says, you want to be a judge? We'll get good health insurance coverage. You go for it. And let me tell you something. If you think that I ran for judge, you're making a big mistake because it was the Freier family that ran for judge. My husband and my kids turned Borough Park upside down. When I went to the party leaders, because you have to get the party's nomination to be on the ballot. When I went to the party leaders here in Brooklyn, they said to me, Rachel, we really like you, but we were told that a Hasidic woman can never win in Borough Park. So we really can't give you the party's nomination. And I looked at him and I said, Judge, if God wants me to win, I'm going to win. And he laughed and he said, you'll make a great judge one day. But not him, not any of my political friends that were local elected officials here in Borough Park in Brooklyn, none of them gave me their endorsement. But my husband didn't stop. He went with these green petition forms. He went to all the rabbis. He went to all the men in his synagogue. He didn't stop. He said, sign for my wife, sign for my wife. And my boys, they took my palm cards and they translated into Yiddish. And they were standing on the street corners. Vote for Freier, says my mama. You have to envision this. These young Hasidic men with the long side curls and the long beards and the long black coats and the black felt hats, vote for my mama. And people saying, da mama, your mom, like, who is she? And you know something? Despite all the naysayers, and by the way, I conform to all the standards of Borough Park. That means I was running for public office without shaking hands with men, as they do here in Borough Park. My picture wasn't hanging up in on any of the buildings or even any of the newspapers in Borough Park. Because in Borough Park, we don't display pictures of women's faces all across the board. And despite that, and despite the fact that my opponents, I know who my opponents were when I ran for public office. It was the EMS people who didn't want me to start the all women's organization. So they got somebody who was an Orthodox man to run against me. And then there was a woman who wasn't from the religious community, but she said, hey, the Orthodox vote is split and she wanted to be a judge. She said, I'll throw my hat into the ring as well. So it was a three-way race. It was me, a woman who was not religious, and a man who was Orthodox. And guess what, my friends? Despite all the naysayers, I got 41% of the vote. So if you believe that God runs the world and you just try your best and you just do it, you have to understand that God can make it happen. And I love to say that I love my job because I have the best seat in the house. Because regardless of which courtroom I'm assigned to, above me are the words, in God we trust. You see that in every courtroom. And if anybody ever questions me about a decision or about a policy, I'll always say, I really don't care what anybody else thinks. I care what God thinks. So let me take a pause now. Let me hear some of your questions and let me respond to your questions so I could really hear from you and connect with this great, amazing audience.
Okay, thank you, Judge Freier. That was really awesome. I would like to open up the chat room for if you have any questions, please post it. And then we will address it. I do want to tell you, by the way, in my family, my father-in-law was from the first Hatzalah members in Crown Heights, and my brother-in-law is the lead paramedic teacher, Leo Davis, and I think you know him.
Oh, he was my teacher. He was my instructor. He is the best instructor that I ever had. He's fascinating. He doesn't just teach, he lives and breathes EMS. Send him my best regards. See, I remember I told him, Rabbi Davis, you far exceeded any of my professors in law school. He was really amazing.
So my mother-in-law is here, so she's listening and she's probably getting some nachas.
Oh, yeah.
But I also want to welcome, by the way, my grandmother should be on here, and my grandmother. Those of you who are familiar with the world of a Jewish feministic world, I think she was. I'm told at least she was the editor-in-chief at one point of Lilith. So I'm glad. I want to welcome her, and I'm glad she's able to join us. So let's go to some of the questions here. Okay, this is from Judy Bernstein. By the way, if you post a question, would love to know where you're from. So just post something. What kind of judge type of cases do you oversee?
Okay, so interesting question, because when I ran for civil court, I thought that this is the job, this is where I'm going to sit for the 10 years of my term. So I found out 2 weeks before my first term started that I was going to sit in criminal court. So for the first 2 years, I was in Brooklyn criminal court, most of the time doing misdemeanors, but often I would do the felonies as well. So the misdemeanors were mostly, I would see young kids from the inner cities, the slums, and I would just see the recidivism. I would see these young kids getting arrested again and again and again. Now, before I started, I remember thinking to myself, criminal court, this must be a mistake, because I don't know the first thing about about crimes. I mean, when I was in law school, criminal law was my hardest subject. I'm from the Hasidic community. I don't go to the movies. I don't watch TV. What do I really know about criminal law? But they said, don't worry, Judge, we're going to train you. And judge school was 3 days. But I'm going to tell you something. There's an expression in Yiddish, was man tit fayener. What you do for others, you do a mitzvah, you think you're helping somebody else, tit men farziach. You're doing it for yourself. One day you're going to find out how this mitzvah that you did actually helps you. So there I was, Ruchie Freier from Borough Park, sitting in criminal court and watching the officers come in and watching these defendants come in with handcuffs, they were just in the cells. And at first, it was like a shock to see, and I almost couldn't look the defendants in the eye. But then I bravely picked up my eyes, and you know what I saw, my friends? In the eyes of these young defendants, I saw the same pain that I saw in the eyes of the young boys that I counseled in my Hasidic youth at-risk program. The same trauma that these Hasidic boys had experienced and were considered at risk was the same trauma these kids were experiencing from the other communities. And I would talk to them the same way I spoke to our boys. I would say, all these traditional Hasidic religious values that I learned in school, you never give up. You always have faith. It's never too late to come back. And I would tell them, you can't give up on yourself. Roll up your sleeves and work hard, and you can turn your life around. I had grown men cry in my courtroom. All I was doing was sharing with them the Torah values of never giving up. And as long as there's life, there's hope. But then on the other side of the bench would be the prosecution, and they would say, but Your Honor, what about the victim? And what about these injuries? We have photos, but I'm sure you don't want to see these photos, Your Honor. And I would say, I'm a paramedic. Hand over those photos. I want to see those injuries up close. So there you have it. What these two mitzvah projects that I thought I was doing to help other people actually helped me those first 2 years that I was sitting on the bench. But you know what's the best experience for sitting on the bench? Being a mother. Because we're judging all day. I was doing an arraignment once, and the prosecution and the defense attorneys were both arguing. And one tells the other, "Stop interrupting me. She can't hear us both at the same time." I said, "Counselors, I raised 6 kids. I could hear you both at the same time." But all kidding aside, I spent 2 years in criminal court. Then I spent a half a year in civil court in Brooklyn. And then I was transferred to civil court in Queens, in Jamaica, Queens. So civil court cases are cases that are not criminal, they're civil. People are suing each other, whether it's for breach of contract or whether it's accident cases, no fault cases, a whole variety of different kind of cases that come through civil court. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to put in the next question from Judy Bernstein, but I want to ask you my question, but you could go back to it after we answered everyone else's question. I would love to know personally how you balance work. You have so much on your plate and family. On a personal level, I find that very challenging, but if you could hold that question, let's see if we can answer. Judy Bernstein is from Newport Beach, California. She was invited by Rabbi Steger from Utah. Here's her question. Was your husband studying Torah all these years? How did you survive financially with school expenses, etc.?
Okay, so I'm very proud of my husband. Thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people make a big deal about me being the first Hasidic woman to run and win public office. But really, my husband is a real trailblazer, because he's the first Hasid that not only supported his wife's idea, but he sponsored my entire campaign. I maxed out all his credit cards, and he didn't stop until I won that race. So really, he gets a lot of credit for being who I am today. Now, for us in our community, having a Torah scholar, a Talmudic scholar is one of the most precious ideals that we can have. So for me, it was an honor to be able to get married to a young man who wanted to become a scholar, and I was working as a legal secretary to support him. And then I became a lawyer, but how did I survive financially? Well, God really runs the world, and I was supporting him. And then at one point I said to him, "Why don't you go to school and see what you can do? Maybe you want to be something, but at the same time, continue studying part-time." So we went to Touro College first, and I thought maybe he'll go to law school and vicariously live my dream for me, but he said no, law school wasn't for him. He went into finance, and he does commercial finance, but his dream always is to continue studying the Talmud. So he works part-time and he studies part-time. And then by the time I was expecting my youngest, my twins, I didn't have to work anymore. And that I had started school when I was 30. And then by the time the twins were born, I would slowly work less and less. And what I did was I saved up for law school while I was still working. So I didn't have to take student loans. I was able to have the money for law school before I actually went to law school. And then in terms of once I graduated, I was able to work and make money. So between my husband working and my working, we thank God we were able to survive. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you so much. This is the next question is from Tyler Harris. He's a student. He asked the following question: how do you maintain your religious convictions in the face of country secular?
Okay, so we're breaking up a little bit, but if I heard you correctly, how do I deal with contradictions to my values when I'm adjudicating? So first I'll say, it was interesting. I was once interviewed by a famous speaker from Israel. Her name is Rebbetzin Yemima Mizrahi, fabulous speaker. And she wanted to interview me by the week of Parshas Shoftim, where the Torah portion was the portion of Judges. And she interviewed me when I was actually still doing criminal court. And she said to me, "Ruchie, how do you sit in court all day and hear of these horrible, terrible crimes that people commit, and then go home and leave your work in court and not bring it when you come home with you?" And I took a deep breath and I thought for a moment, and I said to her, "Rebbetzin, It's the other way around. I don't bring my work home with me. I bring my home to work with me. What I learned at home, what I learned in school, these are the values that help me when I'm sitting on the bench. So I don't see a contradiction. I mean, I see the values of the Torah as the foundation of all law. In fact, many of the courthouses that you go to, you will see paintings, engravings, inscriptions of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, holding the tablets, the Ten Commandments, because we all know it's basically an accepted fact that that was the first set of law brought to humanity. So I don't find a contradiction, but should there ever be a time when there are contradictions, because there are times when judges cannot adjudicate. For example, if one of the litigants is a relative of mine or a former employer or employee of mine, I would not be able to adjudicate and I would have to recuse myself. So there are very, very strict rules about recusal, and there are very, very, very many judges in New York City. So if I have to recuse myself, someone else would cover for me. And I have covered already for my fellow judges when they had to recuse themselves. So should there ever come a time when I feel that my values are contradicted, I'm mandated to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you so much. By the way, Tyler Harris is a practicing attorney in LA, but I believe he was once a student at one point, and he could be still a student of life. But thank you, Tyler, for your question. Okay, this is from Jeff Herman. I'm not sure from where, maybe it says in the bottom of the question. When deciding a case, for Jeff from, I can never pronounce this, from Saskatoon. Okay, I think I got it right, Saskatoon. Somewhere in Canada, but like far. You got to drive a long time and have good tires.
Mhm.
Okay, when deciding a case and there is a discrepancy between what the outcome would be from the Commonwealth law and Torah law, how do you judge? If
Okay.
Torah values demand either a more severe or less severe outcome than what the law of the land dictates? It's a great question. How do you choose between the two?
Okay, so again, if there would be a case where I would feel that there's such a contradiction to my values, I would recuse myself, but that hasn't happened, my friends. I don't think that the Torah values are a stumbling block or an obstacle at all. I find it's just the opposite. You know, when we read Pirkei Avos, we read the portion of the Mishnah in the summer months on Shabbos. There's so much about judges and how you have to judge and how you have to be deliberate in your judgment and be slow and be careful, and everybody has to be innocent until you hear all sides. So I know that everyone's asking this question, but in reality, I don't see it happening. And again, I'm a judge in secular court. I am judging secular law. And the questions that I have was, so did he pass the stop sign? Did they hit the car? Which car caused the impact? I don't think anything in the Torah goes against being honest and being fair and judging with deliberation. So I don't find it. I mean, I haven't been on the bench for so many years. It's been 4 years, but I can say that the Torah values, and I pray 3 times a day, and I pray that God, please grant me the wisdom and the strength to come to the right decision, because I am just a human being. I don't have any supernatural powers. We're just humans. That God, please guide me and help me make the right decision. But I have not found the Torah holding me back at all. In fact, I find that the Torah and the faith that Hashem really is the one that runs the world only gives me strength. It only helps me and gives me strength.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one more question or 1 or 2 more questions to ask, but I want to get to my question, which I'm really interested in hearing. How did you balance all these things? There's so much on your plate, going to school, going to, I don't know if you went to school and ran this EMT organization, or maybe wasn't after. There's so much, and there's family life. Raising a family is a full-time job. How did you manage all that? What's the secret?
So I think you probably share the same secret. I pray a lot. That's the first thing. My mother always taught us that time is like money. It's not how much you have, it's how you spend it. So there's certain things that you can do that can really waste time. For example, when I cook dinner every night, my rule is if it takes more than 20 minutes to prepare, it's not going to be on my menu. It's not happening. I have a freezer and we freeze in advance. And I also live around the corner from my mother. So she always has been there. If the kids were sick, she'd come babysit. And my mother also told us right away when we got married and started having kids, get help in the house. So for all the husbands out there, when your wife says she needs help in the house, just give it to her. Just let her have the help she needs. No one has to be a hero. No one has to be a martyr. Get the help you need. Stick with easy recipes. When the kids were little, when the twins were born and I couldn't shop, it was the years before we had online shopping. I used to just order with catalogs. I would just call up on the phone at night and just order all their clothes by catalogs. And when I was studying, there was no time for parties. I missed all the Hanukkah parties because they were always around the time of year that we had finals. But it passed. Those years had passed, and then we have other challenges. But I think it's just that the faith and the davening, the praying, that has really helped me because there have been times when it hasn't been easy. There were tests that I didn't pass. There were years that I didn't think that I was going to pull through. There were times when I thought that I was never going to be able to get this EMS agency off the ground. It took years. So I did things very slowly. There are some people who try to do accelerated programs, fast track, move fast, quickly. I did everything very slowly. Nothing was fast track. College was part-time. Some people want to do their BA in 18 months. Took me 6 years. And then law school part-time was 4 years. But I enjoyed the process. It wasn't just like a means to an end. It was an end in and of itself, just enjoying the opportunity of sitting in class and using my brain and exploring and listening. So I appreciated and valued going to school because I was an older student. I was an older college student. I was an older law student. I was an older first-year lawyer. By the time I became a judge, I finally caught up. Now I'm like the same age as my colleagues, maybe even a young judge. So I think that it's a slow process. Don't rush. Set your own compass, set your own time clock, and don't let anybody tell you what to do because the naysayers can be very distracting.
Okay, this is from Shandel Shapiro. What do you plan to do after your 10 years as a judge ends?
So I would love to rise up in the courts with God's help. Hopefully I can get promotions to higher levels. I would love to see myself rising up to higher levels in the court system.
Okay, guys, would you vote for Judge Ruchie? Just put in a hands up, put in on your reaction, put in a hands up. We want to give her a hands up, okay? So give everyone vote for Judge Ruchie, okay.
Thank you so much. That's my support base. I want to share with you, Rabbi, before I get distracted, my mincha story, because what I want to share with everybody is sometimes when you want to stay committed, you sometimes have like decisions what to do. So when I started law school, I said, I'm going to continue davening and praying 3 times a day, like I've always done. So the morning services, the Shachris prayer is not a problem. You can do it at home. And the evening services, the Ma'ariv prayer, you could do also at home. But it's the mincha, the mid-afternoon prayer, that's a challenge, especially in the winter months when the sun sets early and you need to say this prayer before the sun sets. So when I started law school, I thought to myself, well, I'm not embarrassed to pray in public. When I travel on the airplane or the subway, I have my little sitter and I pray. But I'm going to be in law school. Where am I going to pray? Where am I going to daven this mincha? If I stand in the law school library and I'm davening and it looks like I'm talking to myself, I'm going to be self-conscious, not embarrassed, but self-conscious. I want to find a place to pray where I'm not going to be seen. That was one thing that I was going to do all through my years of law school. And I was going to do my holiday events, my outreach events, so that I could stay connected and connect all the Jewish students together and bring the holiday spirit to the law students. So there was a law student that was religious, and she was graduating law school that year. And I asked her if she could recommend a place, a private place where I could pray every day. And she said to me, in Brooklyn Law School, she said, by the cafeteria on the third floor, there's a staircase, but there's also a staircase behind the staircase. And if you pray, if you daven over there, nobody will see you. And guess what? For 4 years, I davened mincha at the staircase, behind the staircase, and I did my holiday events, my holiday parties, and it was amazing. The year that I'm going to graduate, close to graduation, I went to the security guard and I said to them, Clyde, I said to him, I'm going to miss you guys. Could you believe I'm graduating this year? And you were always so nice to me. You helped me with my holiday events. You opened up the back door, helped me park my van, helped me schlep my boxes and set up for the students. And I'm going to miss you. And he says to me, yeah, Rachel, and we're going to miss you with your little book. And I said, my little book? What are you talking about, Clyde? These law school books are so heavy. They weigh more than me. Oh, he says, we used to watch you on the security camera every day praying with your little book. Now, here you go. I thought I am davening in a very private, secluded place. Little did I know that was the fire exit with the camera facing me head on for 4 years. So when you do something very private for God, you never know who you just may be inspiring and sanctifying God's name, making a Kiddush Hashem. So do what's right and don't worry what people are going to think, because usually the right thing is what inspires people and motivates them. And you know something? You don't know what you're capable of doing. When I was in school, I was taught that we are all created in the image of God, the Tselem Elokim. That means our potential is beyond what we can imagine. I think statistics show that most people don't even reach 25% of their potential throughout their lives. So I love to end off with this great Hasidic story of Reb Zisha. Reb Zisha was one of the early Hasidic rabbis who lived in Anapol in Russia in the 1700s. And he's on his deathbed and he's crying. And his students, his disciples are saying, Rebbe, why are you crying? You're such a holy man, a tzaddik. You're going to go straight to Gan Eden, to paradise. Why are you crying? And Reb Zisha says, I'm not crying because they're going to ask me up in heaven, Zisha, why weren't you like Moses? And I'm not crying because they're going to ask me up in heaven, Zisha, why weren't you like King David? I'm crying because they're going to ask me, Zisha, why weren't you like Zisha could have been? We don't know what we can accomplish. If we're going to listen to the naysayers, we're never going to fulfill any of our potential. I had naysayers every single step of the way. And I would ask them, how do you know? Do you have some special connection to God that I don't have? So just simply believing that God runs the world, you can accomplish so much. You just have to try. In Exodus, we read about the story of Moses, who was born during a very difficult time for the Jewish people, when the evil ruler Paro decreed that all the Jewish boys have to be killed. And what does the mother of Moses do? She puts her little baby son in the wicker basket and sails it down the Nile River. And who but the daughter of Paro, Batya, hears a baby cry in this basket that she sees floating down the river, but it's too far for her. Remember the story? She couldn't reach it. She was too far from that basket. But what does she do? She stretches out her arm and God does the rest. God helps her arm reach that little baby, and the rest is history. All we have to do, my friends, is lift your arms and try and believe that God can do the rest, and you too will be successful. So I want to wish you all a happy and a kosher Pesach, and be inspired by our history, the history of the Jewish people, of all the incredible miracles that we witnessed at the Exodus, and further and further. And I mean, I have experienced so many miracles just by my story. And that's my message to you. You all can make your own story, and you all have your own story. You have your dreams, and you have your special connection to God. Keep that connection tight. because God is there and God can make anything happen. You just have to believe. In Yiddish, they say, "Teen Misman." You have to do, team, accomplish, that's in God's hands. So thank you so much, everybody. Please be successful. And if anybody has a question that you want to ask me, didn't have time, I'll be glad to give you my personal email address. It's ruchiefreier@gmail.com. If you could spell Ruchie, you could spell Freier, you'll get me. And if you want to see more about my EMS agency that I founded, the documentary film 93 Queen brings you into my home. They spent 5 years following me. And if you want to know why I agreed to do the film, because really, most people say doing a film is antithetical to being modest. Because the film producer convinced me, she says, "Ruchie, let me do the story about you because you'll shatter the stereotype of Hasidic women. And, Hasidim have a very bad image in the media, in the movies." And I said, "I love the idea, but I won't take the risk." But Ruchie, she said, "if you'll let me do it, it'll sanctify God's name." I said, sanctifying God's name, that's my soft spot. So that's why I did the film. So in any case, my friends, it was so nice getting to meet you from all across North America and Saskatoon, Canada. All of you, thank you so much for making me feel so welcome and for your questions. Have a great Pesach, everybody, and stay in touch. I'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judge Ruchie Freier. We want to wish you much continued success. And just if you could let us in when you're going to be running for Supreme Court.
Oh,
I think
all right, for sure.
You have 160, 170, or 180 votes that you could count on. You could scratch that off the list. So
thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, much continued nachas from your kids, from your grandkids, and you should go from Michael Lachal, from strength to strength, and have a kosher and happy Passover. I just want to thank all the following Chabad houses who participated: Chabad of Salem, Oregon; Chabad of Santa Fe, New Mexico; Chabad of Snoqualmie. I'm not going to pronounce this right, but around Everett, Washington; Chabad of Las Cruces, New Mexico; Chabad of Middlebury, Vermont; Flagstaff, Arizona; Sedona, Arizona; Scottsdale, Arizona; Hartford, Maryland; Saskatchewan, Canada; South Shore, Massachusetts; and Park City, Utah. Thank you all for joining us. And just put on your list a few things I want to say. We are planning, if your Chabad house will join us, we are planning a Holocaust survivor who's going to talk to us between Passover and after Passover, and also a Middle East expert. So mark your calendar. There will be other speakers that will be coming. And if not them, there'll be someone else who's interested. And most importantly, mark your calendar. Saturday night, March 27th at night in Spokane. That's after 8 p.m. Make sure either you join a Seder. We have here in Spokane an indoor and an outdoor heated. If you can't join a Seder, make sure you have your own. Make sure you eat matzah and you say the story of the Seder that on after it gets dark. Okay, so and please go to your local Chabad house and take out the credit card or the checkbook and make a donation so they could continue to doing the great work they do. They can't do it without your help, especially now before Passover. There's a lot of needy people that need help. I just noticed, I talked about charity, 20% of the people left. And so make sure to join in. Thank you everyone so much, and have a kosher and happy Passover.
Thank you, and have a good night, everybody.
Laila Tov, everybody.
Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi Han. That was amazing.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Happy Passover.
Sing job.
Passover.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Thank
you.
you. So wonderful. Thank you.
Great
It was great.
presentation.
So
Yeah.
inspiring.
Very good.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you,
Thank
rabbis.
you.
Thank you, rabbis.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That's pretty good.
Okay, everyone have a good, wonderful evening. I'm going to close this event. Thank you so much and look forward for your feedback. Please send your feedback to your local rabbi. Would love to hear your feedback and will encourage us to continue doing these events. So keep sending your feedback. Have a wonderful evening and a kosher and happy Passover.